And we are live. My name is JP Berg, and this is episode 22 of The Philosopher, the Stoic, and the Teddy Bear. As you can see, Chris is not here today. He had something come up, but we are fortunate enough to be joined by Mr. Nico Lagan. How you doing, bro?
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, man. How long have you been in the game, Nico?
Ever since COVID created me, man. I'm a sales engineer by trade, and my employer wanted me to get vaccinated. I gave them the middle finger, and I sat down. I figured out my transferable skills, and creating content just made sense. So if it wasn't for them, I would have never started creating content. I would have never traveled all over Canada, all over the US, getting interviewed and interviewing some of the biggest names in North America. So they created a monster, and now I don't see myself doing anything else.
That's a similar origin story for many of us in this sphere,
Yep.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're going to be discussing some of the Orwellian level censorship bills attempting to be introduced by the penetrated cabinet, and we're going to touch on some of the geopolitical action that's occurring, changing things in an unprecedented sense, especially in regards to Canada. So we'll get going with the bills, man. Well, I mean, what do you think? We're pretty much being transitioned into a totalitarian country.
C2, C8, C9, C12, C16, and the new bill C63 that's going to be retabled soon was supposed to be done at the end of the year, but I guess they ran out of time, or they want to make sure they have a majority first, because that's the next step, right? As soon as D'Entremont walked the floor, I called it. I said 6 months. They're going to have two more, and they're going to have their majority. But it's interesting because I read, one of the things that I do a lot on my show is to do deep dives. Like, compared to all other content creators, I read the bills. I read all of them. Doesn't matter that they're 10 pages or 180 pages long. I will read them from scratch, and I always have lawyers on my show to make sure I understood what they actually meant, and to debate and just to talk what the actual problems are. And I did a deep dive on every single one of those bills, and they all work together. That's one of the things that the average Canadian doesn't understand. And I apologize, I didn't ask what's your guide on swearing. Is that allowed here?
Let it rip, bro.
That's okay.
On
so
you.
I call it a bit fuck you bill. Instead of giving us a big fuck you bill, they decided to strip it into different portions. You look at C2, for example, that is supposedly to address immigration. It's giving the powers to non-elected bureaucrats to run searches on people that exports products. So let's say I design t-shirts, and I do, and I export them to the US. Bureaucrats are now able to go to the Crown, get a warrant to come to my place in order to look into my house, because that's where I store my t-shirts, because somehow they're going to end up in the US. There's a lot of things that they're trying to change in Bill C2 to give more power to unelected bureaucrats. You look at Bill C8. I come from a telecommunication world. Like, I was in that world for 20 years. I used to not only configure that equipment, install it, and then I sold it for more than a decade. And I sold it to the government. I sold it to some of the biggest entities in North America. So when I read that bill, I understand exactly what they're trying to do. It gives the power to Mélanie Joly to be able to strip the internet access from anybody she sees fit. That's it. And they're blanked. Their internet is gone. But the bill itself, if you look at it, what they're trying to do is to set up the infrastructure for AI. If you understand what they're doing and the requirements that they're asking for, they are setting the stage to be able to introduce AI. Why do they need AI? To be able to analyze all the data for facial recognition. Digital ID is coming, and C8 introduces the technology aspect of what's needed for AI, thus the digital ID that they're going to start pushing very soon, just like we're seeing in the UK, and soon you're going to start hearing about in Australia, now that they've banned 15 and under from social media. That's the basis to start a digital ID, because now everybody needs to prove the age that they are if they want to access social media. Then you look at Bill C9, redefining hate. What is hate? Hate is more than disdain. What the fuck does that mean? They're criminal. We had Bruce Party on my show, and you know what he said? It's brilliant. He said that they're criminalizing emotions. And that's exactly what Bill C9 is doing. They're literally allowing the government and the police to decide what is emotionally impacting to someone, which could be anything. But obviously, all the people that call me all the names possible every single day of my life, that wouldn't count because I don't like the government, right? It only counts what I say counts. What comes my way does not count. Then you have Bill C12, which is a stripped version of Bill C2 with still a lot of the problematics in it. You have Bill C16. They're trying to protect our children. They're trying to protect people's sexuality against hate crimes. They're trying to protect our transgender individual that have mental issues against hate crimes. So again, Bill C9 is defining what hate is because Bill C16 needs a hate definition in order to be effective. So they're very clever in their approach. They're literally stripping everything into different bills. They're putting sections in every bill. So Bill C8 allows Mélanie Joly to take me off the internet because I would have said something that would have hurt somebody's feeling under Bill C16. And they're going to go to the definition of Bill C9 to strip my internet access of Bill C8. See how it's very clever, very, very clever what they're doing. And if that doesn't stop me, oh, the guy exports goods to the US, let's strip his house. Let's just make sure that everything is okay. And then you look at Bill C63, sorry, probably the worst bill ever tabled in Canadian history, the Online Arms Act. Luckily, the election, when Trudeau dissolved the government, it actually removed it from the process, but it's going to come back. Mark Miller's talked about it. Sean Fraser has talked about it, that it's coming back. And I thought it would come back before the end of the year because that's what Fraser said. But I strongly believe that what they're doing right now, they were waiting on the UK and Australia. Because I don't know if you're following what happened in Australia after Bondi Beach, but now they're introducing new police force that will be scanning the internet looking for hate. They will actively be looking for hate speech in order to arrest them. So you look at how it works now. Canada's like stage number one. We're starting to see all those bills being introduced. Then you have Australia that has passed those bills, and they're enforcing the power that those bills are giving them. And then you look at the UK, which have been doing it since 2023, if I'm not mistaken, arresting 12 to 13,000 people a year for internet posts. And we're not talking content creators like me that could be considered an agitator. We're talking my mother, your sister, people that are just have an opinion and they post it online. They get a knock at the door in the middle of the night to say, yeah, gonna arrest you today. But they don't necessarily end up in court. They don't end up in jail. Most of them don't. But the process is now the punishment. We're seeing it with the Chris Barber, for example, perfect example. They use that guy in order to remind Canadians that the government's in power. If you dare challenge us, we'll make sure that you pay for it. So you're starting to see how all of those things are connected. And unfortunately, you know what drives me nuts about all of this is that the average Canadian is still too asleep to listen, doesn't care, doesn't see how it's impacting them because he hasn't been arrested. His brother hasn't been arrested. And unfortunately for the Canadians out there that are listening, that are paying attention, that actually realize what's going on, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
That's a very similar assessment to what we generally discuss on this show. It's like instead of the big fuck you bill, it's a bunch of little fuck you bills that work together to fuck you. That's enough exploitatives for me. What do you think, Payman?
I got a question for Nico. I'm always interested in intent, what's going on through the minds of these legislators. So my question to you is, do you think this is like a top-down WEF, they've penetrated the cabinet, or, here's the or, this might be both of them, is this a reflection of ourselves where we live in these urban societies and we're more interested in safety, and we want to be safe from hate speech?
It's both. You know, if you look at the difference, if you look at the traditional definition of a liberal and a conservative, and I'm not talking political party here, I'm just talking way of life, your philosophy as a human being. Liberals like the top bottom approach. Give the power to a government that will push legislation down by saying, this is what we want, this is what the majority wants, and if you don't follow it, there's consequences. So that's how a liberal mindset normally works. If you look at a conservative, they want to build the individuals. They want the individual to be intelligent, to have common sense, to be questioning what's happening around them. Because at the end of the day, a society is just a bunch of individuals that agreed to live under the same laws. We have the same culture, the same laws. We're going to agree to live together because we're pretty much similar, right? And that's the big difference. So it doesn't matter, for your question, it doesn't matter because it's a top-down that's happening. Yes, the average Canadian is weak, is very soft. It has forgotten where we came from. And that's by design. Because ask the average Canadian right now, what does it mean to be Canadian? You know, with the fact that I have the numbers somewhere. I can't remember them by heart, but if you look, Canadians, like regular Canadians, what seems to be on the stage right now, the three of us are being replaced through mass immigration. So we lost our identity of what it is to be a Canadian. But if you go back to what a Canadian is, my family, both of my families have been around here for at least 300 to 400 years. So you're talking about settlers that came here, living in Canada, one of the harshest countries, the harshest climate in the world. We're like number 2 after a place in Russia. They came here with no technology, no electricity, black powder guns, and said, you know what? We're going to take over Canada. We're going to fight bears with black powder guns. The set of balls that those guys had coming here. But what did they have in common? They were courageous, they were Christian, and they wanted to rely on each other. And this is why we're so fucked in Canada, because we've forgotten how tough we are, how we descend from extremely tough individuals, but we remember to stick together with no reason. And we're so complacent. The other part that is a big problematic compared to the US, because I spent a lot of my time in Alabama, down south, they're very patriotic there because they remember having to fight for their independence. That is something that fathers teach their sons. And in Canada, we lost our war of independence. We are very complacent. We are under the crown, and we're very happy to be there. We don't question too much. So yes, to your question, there's a big component of it. It's Canada that is weak, that is ready to just do whatever the government tells us, because we forgot that the government works for us. The government should be scared of the people, not the other way around. We're a lot more than they are. If we decide to stand up, the government is screwed. But we forgot that. We're not taking our power back. And I hope that conversations like the ones that we're having right now in harder times are going to wake people up. But at the same time, the people that are in power, the Mark Carney of this world, he is a WEF agent. He was on the board of the WEF. He was a special envoy for the United Nations. I saw an article today saying that at the end of January, he's actually going to Davos, Switzerland to attend the WEF meeting. This is public knowledge. This is out there. People are reporting about this like, oh, our government is going to attend those world meetings. Those are globalists that are trying to turn a bunch of individual country into a one world government. And what you're seeing, I don't understand how people haven't read his book Values. I didn't read it because I like Mark Carney. I read it because I hate how evil that man is, and I wanted to understand what we're dealing with. He is brilliant. Unfortunately for us, Trudeau was an idiot. It's a lot easier to handle an idiot than to handle a guy that plays an idiot. Because Carney plays like the kind of the idiot on camera, but he's a very clever guy. He's a very, very intelligent guy. He knows exactly how to screw us, and he's been doing it since April. He's been doing it for 8 months now. It's just insane that he is running with the WEF plan. Like, look at the 2050 climate change plan, the green agenda. It was all over the MOU that he signed with Daniel Smith for Alberta. If you read the MOU, it is 100%. It says it that their plan is to hit the net zero 2050 agenda. This is word for word in the MOU. They're not hiding it at all anymore. But people are too lazy to read bills. They're too lazy to read legislation because they don't think it matters to them or it's going to change their lives. Because I think the average Canadian, unfortunately, doesn't think that it's possible for us to become the UK. They're like, oh no, but that can't happen here. We're going to stop it. Oh, how? How exactly? By you watching the game and making sure you're watching Netflix every single day of your life? You know what is really going on? It's yes to both of your points. It's happening on both sides, but I think the reason a guy like Mark Scarney is capable of getting in power is because people are not paying attention. So the symptom A is opening the door to a globalization that is happening by extremely evil people.
Yeah, there's definitely external forces that are entirely coordinating our policies. I mean, all of those bills are straight out of Davos and Brussels. They're going to probably be discussing them in the WEF. And it is, our electorate is not just uninformed, which they are. In addition to that, they're very complacent. They're very apathetic. And then another hurdle happens to be the division. There's so much division occurring, and you don't know where to get together and what to unify around. I frequently say the most important thing presently considering is ensuring that our institutions have integrity, because I feel as you do, Nico, and I think the evidence is all over the place. I feel that Mark Carney is an agent of external oligarchs, essentially, and everything else is a performance beyond that at this point.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I'm a conservative, small c conservative. I don't support the Conservative Party, big C conservative at all. One, they're not conservative. They're just a bunch of liberals. They're right-leaning liberals, and Pierre Poilievre is not a hero. He's not here to save anybody. He's a selfish prick that's doing everything possible to save his career. That's all he's been doing for 20 years. He had the power on November 7th to vote against the budget with the Bloc's amendment at the same time as the NDP was in favor in the Green. He could have triggered an election on November 7th. He chose not to. He chose to vote in with the Liberals to keep their budget in power. Then 10 days ago, they all acted tough saying, we are not voting for this budget. It's bread and circuses for the masses, but yet people are still buying it. And this is, I record over the past year, my co-host and I have recorded 235 episodes of The Political Orphans. He's a lefty, I'm a righty. And that's how we approach it. And we talk about politics and what's going on behind closed doors. And I'm using him as a way to kind of explain, connect the dots, bro. Like, this is what you see, but this is what's actually happening. And we both agree that the left versus right is not a problem. This is the problem they create to make us believe that we are the problem, that somebody you disagree with is your enemy. I record with a guy that I disagree on a lot of stuff every single day. I've been to LA to debate feminists that thinks that men are not needed. I've been to San Francisco to debate a lesbian mother that didn't believe a father was needed. So I always put myself in those situations where I can debate people I disagree with. And you know what happens? We tend to find common ground. We tend to realize that we probably agree on about 80% of things, but media and our government stresses the 20% we disagree on and want us to forget that 80%. We're human beings that agree, that comes from the same country. We're a lot more alike than we are different, but that wouldn't be good. The divide and conquer that Niccolo Machiavelli invented like 400, 500 years ago wouldn't be very effective if we realize that. But that's the biggest problem. The government's not the problem. The people out there are the problem, that listen to the government, that listen to mainstream media, that believe that we are enemies.
I agree. Just a bit of quick housekeeping. I'm going to send it over to Payman. We got about 440 watching live. If I can appeal to you all to please share the stream, it's very advantageous. What are your thoughts, Payman?
Nico, I've been trying to come up with like talking about the problems is necessary, and I do it all the
Mhm.
time. It's very,
Yep.
very depressing and demoralizing. So I'm trying to come up with solutions. Like what we're doing here today, I call it cross pollination, but just
Yep.
podcasters going on each other's shows. Is that a good step? Is that a sufficient step? Do you have any other advice?
My biggest advice probably comes from a conversation I had with Jason Levine where he said, hug a liberal. We were laughing and he's like, okay, guys, it's time to hug a liberal. But his point is that as conservatives or people that consider themselves more conservative, it's up to us to reach out to the left to kind of extend that olive branch and say, you know what, guys, let's have a conversation, which is why I found a liberal I could record with, an anti-woke liberals, because there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of liberals out there that actually believe in what we say or would be convinced. They're ready to listen because they see that there's a problem. You know, if you look at the horseshoe theory, the what's the name? I'm drawing a blank right now. There's a theory that shows that about 70% of people agree. Like we're somewhere the it's a reverse bell. I just can't remember what it's called.
I know what
Theory.
you're referring to. I just can't
Yeah,
think of the name neither
I,
since you said it.
I'm just drawing a blank right now. It's
I think it is the
that
horseshoe theory.
yeah, it might be, but that's not the term I normally use. But all to say that most people politically stand somewhere in the middle, a bit of left of the middle, somewhere in the middle, or a bit right of middle. But about 75% of people sit somewhere in the middle. But we forget that. We really, really forget that part that we are more alike than not. And we focus on the 15% on each end, that 30% are crazy that nobody agrees with unless you're also crazy. Because there's not much difference between the far left and the far right. Their way of life is pretty much the same. The way they act is the same. Their ideology is a bit different. They don't believe the same things, but their actions are the same. But we listen way too much to what they have to say, and we don't talk to each other. So we need to reach out to lefties. We need to record more content with lefties. We need to have, not to be scared of having those conversations. I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm 43. And one of the things that I grew up being told is there's three topics you don't talk about. You don't talk about money, you don't talk about politics, and you don't talk about religion. You know what I talk about every single fucking day of my life? Money, politics, and religion. Why? Because everybody has an opinion on them. You will never meet someone that is meh to any of those three because it impacts our lives every single day. We all have an opinion. Agree, disagree, that's fine. But we need to open that door and be ready to speak about those hard subjects. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of conservatives that need to take the approach that that red pill is a hard pill to swallow. It's very hard for the average individual that knows something's wrong, like they know in their heart that something's wrong. They're ready to listen, but you can't do a deep dive right off the bat and start talking about the WEF agent that Mark Carney is. They're not going to want to swallow that pill. It's too big of a pill to swallow. But if you start like I do with my co-host every day, because he's not a conspiracy theorist at all. I am a massive one. But every day for a year now, I've been introducing concepts every day. Just connecting the dots and just say, what do you think? And you know what? Some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth now, I'm like, whoa, hold up. What? What'd you just say? You know that's a conspiracy theory right there, bro, right? You understand this. But it's a slow process, but it's something that we need to do knowingly. We need to actively be doing this, trying to show people what's actually going on, but doing it in a way that is polite. Because we're not enemies. We are definitely not enemies. And until that day that the average individual realizes that there's no such thing as a left versus right, it's not going to change. So that's where the conversation needs to happen. And I'm not talking like I'm just putting that emphasis on the left. The so-called conservative in Canada, they're no fucking different. I'm hated by the left and the right because I don't like Pierre Poilievre. He's a weak leader that's been playing the globalist agenda for his entire career. And now he's acting like he's going to save Canada, and people believe it. And some of the biggest content creators in Canada are still pushing his agenda like it actually mattered, instead of showing how hypocritical that guy is. Because it's not, the government's not here to save us. I don't believe that we can vote ourselves out of the trouble that we find ourselves in.
It's hard for me to express exactly how much I line up with your assessment. I've written articles about this specifically, this left-right thing, man. That's what they push to the forefront because they want that to get the attention, because it serves to just further their agenda, right? They play us off against each other, and that's exactly how I clarified it. It's like the extremes garner all the attention. So you get on these algorithms, and it's the extremes that are pushing people that are more moderate into harder left or harder right positions. And it just perpetuates the dialectic. It perpetuates this division that we're seeing.
100%. And it's a very easy one to accept, because it's easy. You want an enemy. You want somebody to blame for your problems. That's if we're very lazy like that as human beings. We don't want to admit we're the problem. Because if we were to look as a righty looking as a lefty and say, you know what, I'm wrong, that's a hard pill to swallow for the average individual. But until we do that, there's not going to be any healing between what we perceive to be the left and the right. But the irony is that in Canada, there's not even a right. It's only left. Our Overton window's so far left that our conservatives are liberals. And by the way, for the people out there that believe that a progressive conservative can exist, that's impossible. That's an oxymoron. You cannot be a conservative and a progressive at the same time. You're either a progressive or you're a conservative. I'm so tired of hearing people, we need to be more progressive. Yeah, no, there's no such thing. You're either a conservative or you're not. You can't be a progressive and a conservative at the same time.
Payment.
Yeah, I just go back to what Nico said, and this is something I relate with and I agree with, is I thought you did a great job. Like, a liberal is somebody who believes in top down, wants to be managed, whereas a conservative, or what we call a conservative, is somebody that's bottom up, sovereignty, individualism, agency. How do you bridge that divide? I know you said, hug a liberal, talk to a liberal, but isn't that like, a Christian going to a Muslim and saying, pork is good? Like, how do you bridge that divide? That's my view. I'm sorry I'm turning this into an interview, but
but I love it. I was more thinking about, if you want to really piss off Muslims, you just take a barbecue and you just grill good old bacon on it. Don't even need to say anything. So that's why I had in mind when you said that. But that to me is not a great example, because I don't believe that Muslim values are Canadian values, unlike what our prime minister tries to tell us. I don't think that Muslim values align with the West at all whatsoever. So this is, to me, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, this is something I talk about all the time. But I get what you're trying to say. It is like somebody you disagree with and you extend that olive branch as a Christian. That's why I do it. My values comes from Christianity. We'll be very direct about this. I'm a Christian first and foremost. That is what I am. And that's why I do what I do, not because it's easy, because God wants me to. I don't want to be doing this shit. My life was a lot easier before. I made a lot more money, and I didn't have to deal with idiots. Sorry, uninformed individual. You cannot call other people names, even if it's warranted. But my life was a lot easier before this. But I'm just doing what I'm being told, and I'm good at what I do, so I do it, and I can take it. But that's still what the point is. We need to find a way to do it politely, because that's what it comes down to be able to extend that olive branch just like we do. And yes, it is, unfortunately, it sucks, and we need to do the work as people that, I don't know if I want to say that know the truth, but people that are more aware of what's going on. It's up to us to educate others and to find a way to do it politely without creating more of that divide. And you look at great examples. Look at what happened with, so my co-host, he calls himself an anti-woke liberal. Anti-woke because he doesn't believe that women can have penises. That was his line. When they tried to tell him that men are women, women are men, and dudes with titties are women, he's like, yeah, no, that is one thing I cannot accept. And this is where we need, as conservatives, to find that line is, what is that line in the sand that the average liberal is not going to accept? Transgenderism is one of them for a lot of people out there. Trying to convince them that a man's a woman's a woman's a man, they won't agree with that. So that's something we talk about all the time. But we need to find some that are also political. And again, that goes for the left as the right. I try to talk to the conservatives to say, guys, you guys are not even conservative. What is a conservative? What are the values of a conservative? And you know what? The average conservative have no idea. They consider themselves conservative because they like Pierre Poilievre. But when it comes down to it, they have no clue what it is to be a conservative. So those are the type of education that we need to do. Do it politely. But at the same time, you can't be scared as somebody that creates content, as a journalism, to call the truth, no matter who it hurts. Because I've called all the content creators out there, the biggest content creators in Canada. I know most of them. And I call them out all the time for being shills for the Conservative Party. They're not real conservative. They somehow are aligned with Pierre Poilievre, but they're not conservatives. They don't understand what what conservatism actually is. But that's on us to remind them too. So that's the biggest problem, is that not only is there a divide between the left and the right, but people with somewhat common sense have to talk to both sides and say, guys, you're both wrong.
So I think the way to achieve this is to focus on what unites us. What takes a prioritization over the inconsequential culture war differences? Yep. Because I mean, right now we have to kind of come to the realization that our institutions are being influenced by external forces. That's a big problem. That's a big problem if you're on the left or the right or the center, or if you don't even believe in any of that stuff. And another big problem is just fiat currency in general. The way it's like Carney's able to just print money. We're essentially indenturing our children and grandchildren to this perverse corporation that we think is a country. These are things that speak to more of a populist ethos as opposed to focusing on the culture war. And it's like, look, man, I don't think a liberal is ever going to convince a conservative of anything. I think, like, I read a lot about the psychology around it. Those high in openness and creativity, they tend to lean to the left. Those high in orderliness and conscientiousness, they tend to lean to the right. But most people, like you expressed earlier with that horseshoe theory, they're in the middle. But what's happening is this polarizing moment is pushing us more to these extremes. So the way I would say we affect change is, let's focus on what we can all get behind. Let's put the culture war stuff, and I'm not trying to trivialize these differences. They're important, and we're going to have to continue to discuss them. But right now we have to realize, like, our institutions are working against the people, and that should be the way to bridge that gap. What are your thoughts, Payman?
Oh, if you want to throw it back to me, very quickly, I will say, this is to both of you, but Nico specifically, I am desperately looking for some idea, some approach, some confederation, something that we can unite under so that we can move together in a unified manner. I get like 300 views on my podcast. We get a couple thousand on this one here. And sometimes it sounds like we're screaming into the void. If there was some way, something that we could unite around, like JP said, even if it's like a Robert's Rules of Order, get these freedom groups together, get these libertarians together, nationalists, conservatives, and say what it means. What do we want? What kind of Canada do we want to live in? Ultimately, is the question I want to answer.
There was, I record a lot of content, or a lot. I record with a guy, Wiretap. I don't know if you know him on X, but he creates a lot of good content.
We've had him on.
Yeah. So I like Jason. We agree on a lot of stuff. We disagree on some, but he's a cool dude. I like the guy. And one of the things that he says is that the right needs to organize because the left is a lot better at it than we are. And you can see it just content creation based. Just look when something's going on, how every single people on the left are all saying the same thing. Different wording, they spin it into their own sauce, but they're all talking about the same topics, the same viewpoints, just expressed a bit different. Because they're organized. You know that behind the scene, they're all part of email lists. They're all part of groups that tell each other what they should be focusing about because they have a mission. and they're trying to align that mission. We don't have that on the right. We don't even know what being a right, what being a conservative is in Canada anymore. And that's one of our biggest problems. So, I agree. A payment, there's need to be an organization. And when I say organization, I'm not talking about an entity. I'm talking about like people need to organize together and build those lists and build those teams of people that are aware of what's happening. They're always looking at what's out there and how to bring it to the masses. Because one of the things that I do every day, I will try to take what's trending and bring it back to the truth. Say, you guys are arguing about this when you should be looking at this. This, what they're showing you is what they want you to believe, but this is what it actually means. This is the conversation that we should be having. And we need more people on the right, or people that are libertarians, people that are more conservative in their views, to align with one another instead of fighting one another. And it could start as easily as you and I sitting down trying to figure it out, because it's not that complicated. I know a lot of the people on the right. Most of them I've recorded with and I have their phone numbers. So bringing people together is not that complicated. You just need to fucking do it. People need to take ownership of it and just say, you know what, screw this. We're going to start doing it now. Because I'm telling you, man, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. That's for sure.
I'm wondering if we should organize the right against the left, or more so try to organize the center against both extremes. Like trying to say, like I was suggesting, kind of like, what can we focus on that brings it together? Because I don't think the left and the right divide is the most consequential issues we face right now. And I think they are distractionary, as you indicated. It's almost like Penn and Teller misdirection. It's like, well, they're passing all of these Orwellian dystopia level agenda, these bills through our parliament. They want us to be talking about ostriches or transgenders in the bathroom, right? I feel like we're being played, man.
This is the biggest thing that we're seeing right now, is the censorship and surveillance bills that they're trying to pass. This is the biggest deal. There's a good reason why the First Amendment is all about free speech, because they understand that without free speech, you have nothing. You look at probably the two smartest pieces of legislation ever put in. First Amendment and the second. You have the right to say whatever the fuck you want, and the government can't do shit about it. If they do, you have enough guns to kick them out. There you go. That's the First and Second Amendment explained in layman's term. But there's a good reason why those are the First and Second Amendment. Those are all the things that matters. If you're not allowed to say what you want to say without being imprisoned, you're not free. So right now, why do you think they're going after guns right now? That's not a coincidence that they're trying to remove guns, that they're passing all those censorship bills, because they want to introduce something that is so evil that they don't want us to be able to speak about it, and that's a digital ID. To me, that's the line in the sand. If we cross that barrier of accepting a digital ID that our biometrics, our finances, all of our IDs are attached to, we're screwed. It's going to be extremely hard to get out of that because of technology like Palantir that exists that can literally control our lives. So to me, this is my biggest gripe with the people on the right. I talk about censorship literally every day. I always bring it back something to censorship. And unfortunately, most content creators out there don't, because it doesn't drive views. It doesn't bring them the viewership. It's not what's trending in the news. They'd rather talk about what mainstream media is talking about, but trying to flip it into, Pierre Poilievre would do a way better job at this than Carney, instead of understanding that Pierre Poilievre never stood up for the censorship bills that are being pushed right now. He's using his backbenchers to speak about it because he's too much of a coward to speak about it. And that's your best case scenario. I don't even think he's a coward. I think he's a fucking agent. I think he's just controlled opposition. But the best case scenario, he's a coward. The worst case scenario, like I think he used to be, do you realize he was on the WEF website? It was removed, I think, last year. His face got removed from it, but for years he was on there. So he's a globalist. He's part of the problem. He's not part of the solution. But I think censorship is the place to that we can address it, because this impacts everybody. But that's why I'm saying that I think it's going to need to get worse, because unfortunately, the average individual, both on the left and the right, so that's not a political problem, that's a people problem, don't think that we will become Australia. They don't think that it's possible for us to become the UK. They don't think that we're on our path to become China. Like, they don't see that happening in their head. It's never going to happen. So, unfortunately, I think we need to continue having those conversations. I need to, as Payman was saying, I think he's bang on. We need to organize the right, because the time's going to come where we're going to be needed, where people that are not scared to speak up and to act are going to be needed, and you need to organize them first. You don't want to start organizing that when shit hits the fan. You want to be prepared with a plan by the time shit hits the fan. And it's going to get worse. Like, 2026 is going to be very, very interesting. Like, very interesting, especially with what the US is doing at the same time. Because that's why that's the next subject I wanted to talk about.
Yeah,
those two to me are intertwined.
100%. That's a great segue too. Right before we get on to the next topic, I will appeal to the audience if they could please share the room. We have about 800 people watching. Very advantageous for us. Payman, did you want to maybe grab a few questions on that first topic before we move on to the second?
Yeah, let's see if there's anything here. Here's one. From You Stir the Soul. Canada does not have the police or military to control the streets. What's your response to that, Nico? I think what they mean is, even if they pass the censorship laws, they won't make a difference.
Yeah, he's one of my followers. He's always on my show. So, You Stir the Soul. What's going on, brother? So, you need to look at it this way. They don't need that much control in order to control the average Canadian. The average Canadian is not going to fight back. They're going to do... 2020 was the perfect example. All they had to do is to say, if you don't take the vaccine, you're going to lose your job. You won't be able to go to the restaurant anymore. Oh, no. And people fell in line. The estimates are 81% to 90% of Canadians took at least one shot. And most of them took it not because they believed the vaccine would protect them. They took it so that they wouldn't lose their lifestyle. That's what happened. So did they need troops? Did they need to send people to do it? No, they didn't. So it's not, as much as I understand what you're saying, You Stir the Soul, but if you look at the bills that they're trying to pass, like Bill C2, for example, where they want to give bureaucrats the power to obtain warrants without having to go through the regular channels that we're seeing right now that were put in place in order to protect the individual, that will change the game. You will start having people showing up to your place with warrants issued by a purple-haired fat woman that works for the government. No, but that's the truth. That's what we're facing right now as we speak. And do you think the UK has a massive military? They don't. They don't need to, because people are scared. And as I said earlier, it's always a process. The process is the punishment. You know, I talked to Chris Barber. I had an interview with him a couple of weeks ago, and great dude. Never met him, interviewed him a few times. We spoke a few times. He's a good dude. And, you know, one of his responses, because I asked him, I'm like, hey, man, when it comes to censorship bills are coming, do you think another convoy is needed? He's like, I don't know, but I'm going to see. And I'm paraphrasing. It's not his exact words. I'm just relating the sentiment here. But he basically said, like, I'm going to step back on that one and let other people handle it, because I basically suffered enough, and I'm more focused on creating an independence for Saskatchewan than I am about saving Canada. You know what I mean? So even a guy like him, that was him and Big Red were pretty much the face of the convoy. He's paid. He's still paying for it right now. 3 years, almost 4 years after it happened. And we're talking about a guy that has gotten a lot of shit for what he did. Both from the government and regular people hate that guy for what he did. So this is just proof you don't need much. You don't need much military or police to put it into place. You just need to have enough that will listen and do the work and scare the people. And that's exactly what they're doing with a guy like Chris Barber, Tamara Litch, what they did to Pat King. They crushed dissent. They want to remind people who has the power.
Yeah, I agree entirely. We talk about that a lot. It's like the disincentive, the fear level, right? When you go to
Yep.
China or Iran, not Iran so much now because of the tumultuous nature of the politics there, but generally, when you're in a totalitarian system, you know that you can't criticize the regime.
Mhm.
And people stay in line relative to that massive disincentive. And that's what they're endeavoring to normalize in Canada. They want us all to think, oh, well, we can't go online and criticize a policy because it'll be hate speech and we'll go to the gulags. It's getting that bad. And again, I'm kind of with you, man. I really think Canadians are going to need a shock to their system that's going to necessitate them actually looking at what's occurring. And I hope it goes as smoothly as possible. But I do think it's inevitable. It's like I say frequently, man. It's like watching the Canadian electorate wake up. It's like watching a vessel fill with rainwater. When you're watching it, man, it seems excruciatingly slow, but inevitably it reaches that breaching point, and inevitably it overflows. And I think when it does, that's when we'll see change. But until that moment, I think, like you, they're just trying to normalize the authoritarian nature of what they want to do with their government.
This is going to be something that people will not like to hear, but there's a few baby boomers that need to pass away. That sounds bad for the average individual, and it's unfortunately true, because the people that keep this nonsense going is not the youth. We're looking at some of the most conservative youth we've ever had in Canada are coming right
Let,
now
let
because
me
they're
fix
looking.
that.
Yep.
For the audience, the three of us, we're putting ourselves in that group as well. We are also somewhat culpable. We're
Oh,
handing this
100%.
steaming pile of poo to the youth.
Oh yeah, 100%. But it seems that a lot of the baby boomers out there still believe that Canada's the Canada they grew up in the 60s. They grew up in the 50s. They don't realize how Canada has changed. It is not the Canada they know. It's not even the Canada I knew in the 90s or the 80s when I was born. But they refuse to face that reality because they have the money to get away with it. If you look at who voted the Liberals in again, it wasn't the youth. It wasn't the 35-year-old out there. It was the baby boomers. If you look at when they interview baby boomers, they say the most ridiculous thing because they are not facing the harsh reality that we're facing right now. There was a study that came out that was showing that 1 out of 3 Canadian cannot afford a $1,000 uh, payment, like something that comes out of the blue. More than 33% of Canadians could not afford to pay it. It was less than 19 for baby boomers. So you start looking at the numbers. We're not living the same life my mother and my father lived. We're not. And it's even worse with the youth. So this is a reality. And unfortunately, I don't know. They're going to have to go after them. At one point, I think that Carney won't have a choice because he's destroying the economy so well right now that he's going to have to go after their investment. I think when they start passing taxes on the cost of your house, on what you have saved on your house, now they're going to start waking up. When they go after their money, they're going to start reacting and waking up. But until then, it's not going to happen. But they're a massive problem. Like baby boomers, and a lot of them follow me, funny enough, because they agree with what I'm saying. But it's unfortunate that a lot of Canadians still to this day believe that we are living in the same Canada they grew up in.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you want to do another question, Payment, or should we just move on to the second topic?
I can bring up another question. But unacceptable asks, what is that clicking in the background? I hear it as well. I don't know what it is. We probably can't fix it midstream. Trevor Benson 3488. Anytime we try and get together, we are labeled racist. What's your response to that?
Again, Trevor Benson's one of my followers. Love that guy. He's always on my show too. So, but he's absolutely right. But at the end of the day, bro, it's the 15% we were talking about earlier. If there's one thing I've learned over 5 years of creating content is that there are people you can influence their open to be influenced. They're open to listening, and some of them are not. Don't waste your time with the people that are not. And if you're going to call me racist for saying that we have a mass immigration problem, I'm not going to be able to convince you that you're wrong. I'm not going to even try. My message is not for you. My message is for the people like my co-host, that his son, that's 16 years old, could not find a first job because they weren't hiring people that were white, as bad as this sound. Everywhere they went, all those, I dropped out of high school. I was 14, 15 years old. I didn't go back to school until my 20s. You know how I paid for my college? By working at Tim Hortons. I made donuts. I was hiding in the back when donuts were still made live at the Tim Hortons. That job I couldn't get anymore today. My kids, like your kids are 16, 18, 20, can't get that job anymore because it is given to other immigrants. They import people to fill low-wage positions. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a fact. And me saying it is not racist. It's true. So that's the thing. Can I convince somebody that believes that I'm racist, that he's wrong? No, and I'm not going to even try. So I'll never stop saying what I'm saying, because if it hurts your feeling, you can go fuck yourself. I'm not there to make you feel good about yourself. I'm there to show you that you're wrong. You don't want to listen? That's fine. One day when it impacts you, you will listen. But until then, you're a fan of psychology. What the psychology tells you? People don't change unless changing hurts less than continuing what they're doing. But until the day that staying the same is easier than changing, they will never change. That's why it needs to get worse before it gets better. So Trevor, bro, don't waste your time on people that call you racist. It's not even worth it. It is not worth it. We need to talk to the people that know that something is wrong, but they unfortunately don't know what it is. They can feel it. They can see it. I spent a lot of my time in the US over the past 5 years. And when my wife and I came back after almost 3 years of not being in Canada, we came back to the same neighborhood she grew up in, the same neighborhood I used to go in. And I was just looking at the cars. That sounds stupid for the average people, but I was just looking at the state of the cars. Because, when people have money, they buy nice cars. When people don't have money, they keep the same car longer. That's just the way that we are. If you have enough money, you buy nice things. If you don't, you keep the things that you have and you try to make them last. I can't see what people have in their houses, but I can see their cars. And if you start looking at the cars in the neighborhood that she grew up in, a very middle-class neighborhood, it's not poor, it's not rich, but it's just the average Canadian. You look at the state of the cars. They're old, 10 years or older. They're all rusty. People don't take care of them as much because they don't have the money. That shows you how the average Canadian is hurting. 42.3% of our money goes to some type of tax, municipal, provincial, or federal. This is a fact. Those are the numbers that Fraser Institute just released last year. 42.3%, and our government is still sending more money to Ukraine. 24.5 billion in the past 3 years, when 1 out of 4 Canadian cannot afford food. They're food insecure. They have to skip meals in order to pay their rent. Those are hard facts. Those are not political. Those are facts. And this is how you speak to people out there that know that something's wrong. You show them facts based on numbers. People like to see numbers. It impacts them. But how many people out there can afford? If you're old enough, I remember what the 2000s were, the beginning of the 2000s. I remember the 90s and how different Canada was. So there's ways to approach it, and I think facts are the way to go. But don't waste your time on somebody that thinks that throwing facts out there is racist. You're never going to change their minds.
Well, the term racism, and I mentioned this to a coworker recently, and I told him, like, a lot of these cultures that are coming in, like some of the Indians and some of the people from other places of the world, they don't have a term. They don't have a translation for that term, because racism only exists in Western countries as a concept. It's almost like an in-group preference is a given, and they're from more homogenous countries, and they just don't have a necessity to have invented that word from a semantical standpoint. So it's something to keep in mind how silly that is, to call somebody racist. You can call somebody hateful, but racism specifically, it's just lost all its power, I feel.
Or you could see it a different way and say that India, for example, is filled with Indians. So there's not a lot of people from different countries that goes there, so they're not racist.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a homogenous country.
My point. So you kind of prove. So it doesn't exist because they're not multicultural. That's kind of ironic, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah. So maybe
So-
that's the reality they need to face.
On
There's no
that one,
racism where you're from because you guys are all the same.
yeah, 100%. Before I hand it over to you, Payman, I just want to appeal to the audience. We're almost at 1,000. We would like to surpass that. We'd like to double that ideally. So if everyone could please share the stream, it's very appreciated. What are your thoughts, Payman?
I don't want to repeat what both of you said. I agree completely. I'll throw it back to you. Maybe we can move on to the next topic.
Okay, yeah. So the next topic, we could focus on Venezuela, but I think it would be more interesting to talk about the economic and political repercussions for Canada relative to what just transpired. Number one, look at our oil. Our biggest export has now been immensely devalued, and we don't have a customer for it. So what are your thoughts regarding that, Nico?
It ain't good. Let's say that. It definitely isn't good, but I strongly believe it's part of the plan. If you go back to the WEF agenda, Carney is destroying our economy on purpose. He's finishing what Trudeau started because he wants us to be dependent on the IMF. He wants us to go bankrupt. Yet, how insane is it that we have one of the richest country in the world when it comes to natural resources, and 11 years of liberal policies have kept them in the ground? We are killing our own economy by not digging, by not extracting our natural resources, and putting so much red tape like what we saw in the MOU that was signed with Daniel Smith. And by the way, guys, people in Alberta, Daniel Smith's not your friend. By signing that MOU, she basically showed you that she agrees with the 2050 net zero agenda. So she is a globalist. And she came out afterwards saying she is a federalist. And unfortunately for Alberta, I fully understand why you guys want to separate. But she's not the one that's going to bring you there. That's just an in-between here. But to go back to what you were saying, Venezuela opened the mind to a lot of people out there that the big swinging dick that is the United States has the power to do what the fuck they want. And there's nothing that you can do about it. And that's why the Monroe doctrine is so important. That even I, a week ago, wasn't aware what the Monroe doctrine was. I'm not the biggest knowledgeable guy when it comes to the 19th century political realm that was the United States. I didn't know that President Monroe in 1823 passed policies that are called the Monroe Doctrine that would basically was a state of mind of preventing the colonizers that were Europe to come to America, both North and South America, and try to recolonize them, to bring more of them here. So Monroe said, no, we're going to create policies that will say, no, you're no longer welcome here. Your influence is no longer welcome. And why it's relevant today, because Donald Trump brought it back. In his security assessment that was released in December 2025, so last year, he made mention of the Monroe Doctrine. And the reason why he talked about it is because of things called corollaries, which are amendments to old laws. That's all a corollary is. But now there's a Trump corollary that was entered into the vernacular of people, where Trump is going to take the responsibility of protecting the U.S., the protecting their interest. And at the end of the day, that's what the Monroe Doctrine was. At its essence, it was to keep North and South America the way it became and stop influences that came from the old world, that came from Europe. Now those influences obviously come from China. They come from Russia, mostly from China. But if you look at what he's planning to do, and he did it in Venezuela, he even said that the reason he did it is because of the Monroe Doctrine. So don't believe the narrative that he did it because Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, was a narco terrorist. That's the excuse that he's giving to people out there to make them feel good about this. But the reason he did it is because China was heavily involved trying to get the oil out of Venezuela, which Venezuela has the #1 oil reserve, proven oil reserve in the world, which because of communism that they've been under for 40 years now, they haven't been extracting properly. And Trump took over Venezuela as per the Monroe Doctrine to say, we don't want outside influences to come in North or South America to change the nature of this hemisphere. And when you think about it, it's about time somebody does it. Agree with it or not, we can't do it as Canada. We don't have that type of power to do it. So agree with what he did or not is irrelevant. But this is how the world works. There's always empires out there that will protect their nature. China rules Asia. Russia rules Eurasia. And guess who's responsible of the Western Hemisphere? It ain't Canada. It ain't Venezuela. It is the U.S. And they're going back to a time where the U.S. was not scared to play that role, because if you look for the last decades, you haven't had a fighter president. They were mostly trying to get along with the rest of the world, like all of our opinions matters. But when you got the big dick in the room, guess what? You're the one that makes the rules, and there's nobody there to stop you. Oh, the world is going to be mad. Who the fuck cares? You think Trump loses sleep over what the world thinks of what he's doing? No, not at all. But where it impacts Canada, both on the Alberta side, obviously, because in Venezuela, they have high sulfur crude oil, just like Canada does. They will be using the same refineries that Alberta's using through pipelines to send to Texas in order to get refined down there. Turns out that Venezuela has the same type of oil, and they're not producing much right now. They're only producing like 1 million barrels a day, so 365 million a year, compared to 1.2 or 1.3 billion a year they were producing in the 90s at their highest, which is just 500 million under what Alberta's producing right now. So they could easily go back to that times. And in the short run, unfortunately for Alberta, they're going to lose 10 to 20% of their exports that they're sending to the US. And that represents in dollars right now, because those dollars have changed. On January 6th, they were $32.9 billion that would be at risk out of the $170 billion that they sold to the US in 2025 when it comes to energy products, so mostly crude oil. But now, as you were saying earlier, it has lost value. The discount that the US get on our oil, because it's so high in sulfur, it's so expensive to clean, has gone up almost $1. That doesn't sound much to the average people, but when you're exporting 1.5 or 1.6 billion barrels, this is a massive, massive amount. And the reason being that Venezuela can use tankers to go to the Gulf Coast in the US and drop like the 500 million barrels that Trump announced 2 days ago that are headed to the US soon. And when we say soon, we're talking about couple of months it's going to be there. And 500 million barrels represent about 2 months of Alberta supply that they send to the US. So they're literally overnight, they're going to be able to steal 10 to 20% of the revenue that Alberta depended on. And that's not counting the carbon tax at the provincial level that the MOU states at $130 a barrel, plus the pathway project, the carbon capture pathway project that they sold as part of the MOU. And by my calculations for your listeners, 20 to 30% is the increase that is going to put on Alberta oil right now. If they go with that carbon tax at $130 a barrel, $130 a ton, sorry, and they add the pathway project carbon capture that is required now, they're gonna increase their price about 20% over market value. Why would the US buy something that is filled with green agenda bullshit when Trump has made it very clear that this is his opinion on the green agenda? He's been very clear about this. So Alberta's in trouble. Don't believe what the media is telling you. Alberta's in trouble. 10 years from now, Alberta could literally not sell anything to the US. 10 years is how long it could take to replace the Midwest, which is going to take longer. But not only is this impacting Alberta, but where people need to be careful is about the Northwest Passage. So I don't know if you guys, most of your listeners are aware of what the Northwest Passage is, but in up north between us and the Arctic, there's water pathways that are being used by international countries. Canada calls them inland, that they belong to Canada. Trump is not of that opinion at all. He considers them to be international waters. And why they're so important is, for example, they're taking the estimate is about 7,000 kilometers off the route of China going to Europe to go sell their goods. So Trump, through the Monroe Doctrine, could decide to call those international waters, and because we're not protecting them the way they need to be protected, and remember that those pathways, those waterways go through Alaska, right? They're on the north coast of Alaska. He could decide to take over those waters, put military there that belongs to the US Navy, and say, we are now going to control it because Canada's doing a very shitty job at controlling it, which is not wrong. We're not monitoring those pathways the way they should be monitored, but that gives a very good excuse for Trump to say those pathways are now ours. Not only could he put tolls on them, could he control them and say whatever he wants, he could put economic pressure on China by saying you're no longer passing here because those waterways don't belong to you. You have to go the long way around. Imagine the power that it gives to the US, but that's why the Monroe Doctrine is so important. And I'd encourage your listeners. We did a deep dive like 3 days ago. We spent an hour. I got so many good videos just explaining what the Monroe Doctrine and how important, how destructive, or how, I don't want to say destructive, but how impactful it can actually be. So it's very, very important for Canadians to understand what the Monroe Doctrine is and the type of power that it gives to a guy like Donald Trump that really is not looking for people to approve of him. He doesn't care about that. He's not there to make himself liked. He's there to make America better. At least in his mind, he's making America better. And a lot of Americans agree with him.
So what are your thoughts, Payman?
Just really quick, I mean, I agree with Nico. I think there's the national security strategy document set out a divorce with Europe. So he's consolidating in the Western Hemisphere, sort of, what do they call it, Fortress North America, North and South America. And I think, now this is my thought, it feels like they're creating a new Cold War. The reason for kicking China out of Venezuela is so that they don't have access to oil for their fleet, and in anticipation of this new emerging Cold War.
Yeah, it's like the multipolar world, and we're seeing all of the great powers start to readjust themselves. Trump's taking care of his backyard, Panama Canal, Venezuela. What's that mean for Greenland and Canada is going to be what we're going to see within the next couple of years.
And you know, what's interesting is that brings up the 51st state conversation again, without having to mentioning it, because he is playing geopolitics on a world stage with the top three superpowers. The US being the Western Hemisphere, the China having Asia, and Russia having Eurasia, and then you have a bunch. No, unfortunately, nobody really cares about Africa. Sorry, Africa. And Europe, they're all divided, but NATO kind of puts them together. But they're not a superpower. NATO is not a superpower whatsoever. They like to send you strong worded documents that don't mean shit. At the end of the day, they don't care. So it's 2026 is going to be very interesting, and I don't think he's gonna wait very long to show his strategy when it comes to Greenland and Canada. And unfortunately for Greenland and Canada, there's nothing much we can do about it. We have a 65,000 military. The US is something like 2 million. Good luck. Good luck.
We have tampons.
We have tampons. Yep, we have tampons. But it's not going to go to an invasion. That's not going to happen. but they can squeeze us any way,
Economic
shape, or form.
force. That's
What's
his own
Kuzma?
term.
What's Kuzma? Kuzma's worth between Canada and the US, like reciprocal, $950 billion. That's how much that contract is worth, or at least was worth in 2024. We'll see in 2025. The numbers are not out yet, but it was worth somewhere between $9 to $950 billion. 75 to 80% of our exports go to the US. We are fucked. The US decides to not take our money not take our products anymore. We're screwed.
Yeah, I agree. There's no
Carney
replacing them.
cannot thank you. That's exactly what I was going to say. For 9 months, Carney's been pledging to travel the world, and he got like $6 billion in new contract over the next 5 years. All the rest are letters of intent. That means nothing. That's toilet paper. Doesn't mean anything. So we're spitting in the face of our greatest ally, our greatest customer, for virtue signaling. That is the situation that Canada is in. And I'm hoping that speaking about history, speaking about facts, the way I'm doing now, can kind of open the eyes of the people out there, because it doesn't even matter if you're looking at mainstream media. Mainstream media is not talking about the Monroe Doctrine. They're not trying to impress that on their listeners, to say that that's not the first time the state has done that. It's just it's been a long time since you had a ballsy president to actually do it. And it doesn't matter. I really don't care that you agree or disagree with him. And he doesn't care either. He's going to do what he thinks is right, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's a fact. Now, who should we align with? Europe, that has no power, that has no money to buy our products? Or should we align with one of the biggest military powers of the world and our biggest customer? We have the God-given chance of sharing the biggest land crossing between two countries, the biggest one in the world. And it just turns out that it is the biggest economy in the world, and they need our products. But we have a leader that could not care less, that is doing everything possible to spit in his face by backing Ukraine, by backing Palestine, by now saying that we will stand with Greenland. With what, you fucking midget? Sorry, but man, that guy pisses me off. What is he going to stand with? He can't even stand. You don't even see him when he's standing.
That's good. Maybe with the last 20 minutes, 15 minutes, we'll take some more questions. Payman, do you want to curate some, or do you have anything on the go?
No, I got some things lined up. Let me see which one's the best one. I don't know if we want to go back to the boomers.
That always pisses people off.
Hot topic, yeah.
Okay, here's one with boomers. Sue Calendar says they are doing a massive wealth transfer now with reverse mortgages. Is that one way that they're going after the boomers?
No, they're going to tax the I was just drawing a blank earlier, but they're going to tax the what's the term? When you have the build up it's going to be more of that, because
unrealized gains tax.
Unrealized gains, or the amount of your house that's paid. If you have $1 million house that's already paid because you paid $300,000 for it 30 years ago or 20 years ago, they're going to start taxing that portion of your house. And this is how they're going to go after the boomers. This is how, because they're going to have to. He's printing money like inflation doesn't matter. He's living off credit cards, thinking, oh, those are generational investment. No, you ass. They're generational in debt. You're literally indebting our grandchildren, and the baby boomers are approving of it. This is what drives me nuts about baby boomers. Do you not care about your grandchildren? Are you so selfish that you think that all that matters is that little you right now? Your grandchildren having to deal with your mistakes right now? You live the best life. If you look at North America, when was the best life? The best time to be alive? After the Second World War. The babies that were born after 1945 to 1960, they had the easiest life in North America. Best economy, no real fights after that, and they got to build wealth like it was nothing. One person, mother could stay home with the children, father worked at a very average job, had 2 cars in the driveway and a house. Try doing that today. Good fucking luck. And they're still selfish in believing, and I'm not just talking about the people out there. My family's no different. They don't understand what's actually going on behind closed doors. But I think it's, again, they're going to have to go after their wealth. Because if you look, the government's doing everything possible for the price of houses to not drop. Because if houses throughout Canada start losing 30, 40, 50%, the equity, that's the word such a complicated word that I can remember. Equity, wow. If they start losing that equity that their whole lifestyle is based on, they're going to wake up. And my co-hosts laugh at that all the time. He's like, they need to lose their houses.
And it's like you say, man, it's very possible. Things are going to get hard, and I think they're going to get hard fairly quick. And I think we're
2026.
We're going to understand what economic force means. What are your thoughts, Payman?
No thoughts. We can go on to the next question.
All I was going to say, I was going to ask you guys that earlier. This whole thing, the way our economy is going, the way Trump is acting, or the way he's being the president of the U.S., that's unapologetic. The 51st state conversation is going to become more and more relevant, as in, do you want to continue down the path of a globalist like Mark Carney, or would you rather become American? Because both of them are not, let's be honest here, they're both very flawed men. Like, Trump is no hero. Like, sorry, he's doing what he thinks is best. Agree with him, disagree with him, doesn't matter. But what's the better choice now? Is it better to be under Carney? Or are people out there kind of wishing that Trump would Maduro him, which is not going to happen, but could take over the country economically and force us to become part of the U.S. or form a North American alliance, or whatever you would call them, like like you see in Europe?
I think it's inevitability.
I'll share one of my comments following up on that. I think Donald Trump has completely outmaneuvered Mark Carney completely. I think Mark Carney thought he could come in and he could slow Trump down. And we're in just such a weak position with UNDRIP, what's going on with the land, what's going on now with the oil in Venezuela. I wouldn't be surprised if they took Alberta and Saskatchewan, and Carney's screwed, because Trump won't let a foothold of the globalists in North America.
We'll see. But I don't know what's worse. Is it better? Because I spend a lot of my time in the U.S. I don't have that big of a problem becoming an American. On the contrary, I'd become an American tomorrow. But I'm curious, for the average individual out there that's starting to understand what's going on, what's worse, being under Carney or being under Trump?
Yeah, there's some Canadians that would literally be waiting in a lineup for a piece of government cheese, and they would still feel superior to Americans. There's just those Canadians that can't see past that. And I think the economic realities are going to rear their ugly heads and make people start to answer these questions. I came on the scene right when this was starting to happen. That's when I started to build my following. I was very pro 51st state, and I still am, and I still stand by what I said then. I think it's almost a practical inevitability at this point. If what's occurring now continues the way it's going, I don't see a trajectory in which it doesn't happen. I'll phrase it that way.
And what a badass move from the U.S. They could win without a war. Arguably the biggest country with the most untapped resources on the planet. If you're talking to a business guy, let the economy get destroyed. Devalue that economy as much as possible so that you can pay penny on the dollars for all the natural resources that are out there. And that is what is happening right now. Don't fool yourself. Either Carney's doing it or Trump's doing it. Either Trump's doing it for the state or Carney's doing it for Europe, for their WEF, as a WEF agent. No matter what, it's happening. No matter what, our economy is going to get a lot worse. That there's no doubt. That's why I asked the question, is it better to align with Europe, the WEF, Davos out of Switzerland, or is it better to align with the US? It's not great choices, by the way. I'm not saying they're great options. I'm just saying that there's not a lot of good options out there right now.
I can't imagine that being a hard answer for me. What are your thoughts, Payman?
I wanted to bring up another question. Unfortunately, there's not really many questions on Venezuela, but there's Gary Muscleman 3878 says we've had 50 years of socialist indoctrination. Canada is a socialist country. 80% of its citizens are totally dependent on the government for survival. Nico, what do you think?
Ding, 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 ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. I agree with you. And he used the proper word, indoctrination. That's exactly what our education system is. It's indoctrinating our children to believe that socialism is a great thing. And Carney's a socialist. I call him Marx Carney. I don't know if you caught that. I think Payman, you did, because you can, but I call him Marx Carney because he referenced Marx. He calls Marx like 40 something times in his book. He's a Marxist. So yes, Gary, you're absolutely right. This is why it's gonna have to get worse before it gets better, because men are gonna have to start teaching their kids what socialism is all about, and they're probably gonna have to see it for themselves to understand. Venezuela being the perfect example. They're sitting on the biggest reserve of oil and gas, the most needed commodity in the world, and the average individual is poor as shit. Why? Policies. Because of their government. That's 100% on the government's face. But they voted for this, right? So you'll see, give it a year or two, Venezuela's not going to be the same. Under a capitalist country like the US, you won't recognize Venezuela in the next couple of years as Canada gets destroyed more and more, until probably the US does the same to Canada.
Yeah, I think it sets up the infantilization of the populace, right? We are entirely reliant upon the government for services that ultimately only they will be set up with the infrastructure to provide. And that's what they want. That's what they're pushing. And that's what the conditioning has been. I think Gary Muscleman is spot on in his assessment.
But you can push it even further by talking about survival as a whole. Like I was watching Idiocracy. You've seen that movie, right? I was rewatching it like yesterday or the day before, 2 days ago. And there's no survival of the fittest anymore. And that's what the basis of the movie is, right? The people that are intelligent understand that it's costly to have children, that you have to be prepared for it, so they don't have as many children because they understand. They're smart enough to question what it is to have children. The dumbasses out there, they don't give a fuck. They sleep with 5 different women. They just reproduce. Guess what happens over centuries when people don't die anymore for being stupid? They're able to procreate. Stupid people will procreate more than intelligent people. Unfortunately for the intelligent people, they're going to be overran by stupid people. There you go. That's Idiocracy for you. And we're no different. There is something to be said about survival of the fittest. Because now, if you look at our country right now, the asylum is being run by the patients. It's not the smart people that are running this country anymore. And the dumbasses out there agree. So that's the situation in which we are. We're starting to see Idiocracy in real time right here. We're seeing the first steps of Idiocracy happening right now, where people that could not survive without the government are not only allowed to reproduce, but vote. And I'm not trying to say they should. I'm not trying to say that we should stop people from reproducing and they shouldn't be allowed to vote. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just stating a fact that they are having a lot of children and they're still voting and they're morons.
I was going to say people mistake the word socialism with charity. So when you say socialism, they think helping people, someone in need. And what you're describing, Nico, is bureaucracy. What I always say with things like hate speech legislation, like someone is going to enforce that hate speech legislation. If I swear at an old lady when I was growing up, that someone was my dad. You know, he'd slap me across my face. Whereas now that power, that decision making, that agency is being transferred to the government. And I don't know how to make Canadians understand that because they trust their government completely.
It's what happens when men are raised by women. This is exactly what happens. This is what I started creating content around masculinity. And unfortunately, the average man now has been raised by a woman. 50% of marriages end up in a divorce, and 90% of the time, women get the children. Who do they get raised by? Women. spiteful women that hate their husband, their ex-husband. So what do you think is going to happen? Just look at our education system. 70 to 75% of the teachers are women. Women care. That's in their psychology. They care. They want to help the youth. But most of the women in Canada are fucking woke. They're feminists. We're drugging our kids, our sons, because they're hyperactive. Hey, they're not hyperactive. They're men. They're boys. They're filled with testosterone. You cannot expect a boy to act like a girl because they're not. But we're suppressing the masculinity of men. We expect them to be more like women. And when they are masculine, we tell them that they're toxic. What do you think that creates? A society of bitches that we're seeing right now. But this is why do you think the average man doesn't stand up for their beliefs? Because they were taught it was wrong. They were taught to not try to move the needle and hurt people's feelings. That's what we're teaching people. Yet my Savior, Jesus Christ, flipped tables. We're scared of flipping tables, yet he was crucified for questioning and telling people, for hurting their feelings. Christ would be considered hateful if he came back today. But the Romans, the Jewish people and the Romans sacrificed him for what he said because he hurt their feelings. It's insane. It's absolutely insane that we are where we are. But it's going to change. Like you look at the fourth turning, if you're familiar with the theory that there's 4 levels, about 20 years in each. The last Great War was in 1945, 80 years later. You know that saying that
strong men make good times, good times make
100%. Yeah, strong men create good times create weak men create hard times, and hard times create tough men or great men. We're at the tail end of this. We're at the end now. We're entering the last part where great men or tough men are going to be needed. Strong men are going to be needed. And they say an 80 to 120 year cycle. The last one ended in 1945 after the Second World War. So there's something that's going to happen. We're pretty much bang on the 80 years theory right now as we speak. And there's a lot of strong men that are going to come out of this. And I think those are going to be our sons. At least I have a 6 months old, and he's going to be one of them. I'm going to show him to be a man. I'm not going to show him to be a bitch. He's going to be a man, and he's going to understand why I do what I do is for him. I want him to speak up when he needs to speak up. He needs to be a man. He needs to know how to fight. He needs to know how to care for others. He needs to understand that he needs to protect his family, protect his country.
I agree 100%. Do you guys want to do a couple more questions? Does everyone have time?
Yeah, I'm good.
Another one?
Yeah.
Can I just wanted to mention something. I'll bring up a question. Nico's saying that, it's causing weak men. That's kind of the purpose. So feminism is part of the problem, but it's the feminization. If you feminize men, they don't fill their role of protecting. And if they don't fill the role, that responsibility goes to the government. Government, it's like a black hole. It's just gobbling up all of these rights and responsibilities, and it's getting bigger.
But it's done on purpose. If you believe in the globalization, this is done on purpose. How do you take over a society? You remove God from the equation. That is always the number one thing. Every single time they try to endanger a country, they go after God. God becomes the government, so you trust what the government tells you. Then they remove men from families, and then they make men weak, so they won't fight back. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. If men are not part of the family, teaching other boys what it is to be a man, and men on general are weak, so your coaches. I learned a lot. I was bullied as a kid. You know what I did? Nothing. But in my 20s, I discovered martial arts, and I ended up fighting, and I became a North American champion fighting. And I was a coward. And you know what what I realized through coaching? I met some of the greatest men I've ever met, and all they wanted to do is use a shared passion like martial art to make men better. This is what we need. We need more men out there that are masculine and won't apologize for it, that have access to the youth through sports, for example. Because that's what a good coach is. A good coach uses sport or any pastime to show life lessons, to show boys what it is to be a man. So if you remove God from the equation, you have no purpose. You remove the purpose from the equation and you replace it by the government. You remove men from the family, you prevent men from teaching their sons what it is to be a man, and you feminize men. There's no more coaches, there's no more mentors out there that can pick up the slack and teach those kids, those boys, what it is to be a man. This is all done on purpose. Feminism is a Marxist ideology.
It's definitely one of the root causes of our problems. That's for sure.
We got a question from Doug Bebb. Europe is finished. Will Canada join them? We kind of touched on this. So my question is, what do you gentlemen think will happen in the next 6 months to a year?
You go first, Nico.
C2, C8, C9, C12, C16, and the new Bill C63 are going to pass within the next year. This, to me, is a no-brainer. It's going to happen. We will become, as I said earlier, I don't know if you caught that part, Doug, but there's 3 stages that you can see throughout the world, and they're all Commonwealth. It's not a coincidence. But right now, Canada's passing legislation that will allow the government to censor speech. That's what the Liberal government is doing right now, and the Conservatives are not doing much to stop it. The next step is what's happening in Australia. They're enforcing those laws right now by censoring, let's say, social media for teenagers. Instead of giving the power to the parents to say, hey, you're not happy with what's on social media? Maybe you should be a parent and parent your children. We're giving that power to the government. And now the government is implementing new police forces that will be actively looking for hate speech in order to arrest people. And then you look at the third stage that the UK is. They're arresting 12 to 13,000 people a year for social media posts. There's people in prison right now for have hurt people's feelings. So those are the 3 stages that I can see like super fast between Canada, Australia, and the UK. And we're definitely going to become Australia. I just hope that we won't need to become the UK, but I believe that we're going to become the UK. That's the hard part that I was talking about earlier, because I guarantee you, man, this year Australia is going to start arresting a bunch of people just like the UK has been doing for 2 years. It's the process.
I think there's sorry about that. I think there's 2 factors that contribute to that presently as to what we're going to see. It's that what's going to be the reaction of the populace, number one. We've seen in other countries, Bulgaria and Nepal recently, when censorship and various corruption things that have occurred, the people actually, surprisingly in some cases, did rise. But the other factor we have, and we touched on this throughout the episode, is proximity to America. That could potentially save Canada from a future that's going to be more similar to the Commonwealth countries. And we all see the same thing. There's no way this is organically occurring. It's an agenda that's being imposed broadly from an external force.
You're looking at all the Commonwealth countries. You're looking at the West being invaded through mass immigration. That's not a coincidence. It all started happening at the same time around 2020. Mm-hmm. It's not a coincidence. People need to open their eyes and understand that we are being replaced, and the values that we hold dear are being replaced at the same time. This is all done on purpose. The guy that Mark Carney, I can't remember what his name is, the guy that Mark Carney just assigned as the new ambassador to the U.S. is one of the co-founders of the Century Initiative that wants to bring Canada's population from 41 million to 100 million over the next 74 years. How do you do it when the birth rate in Canada is like 1.2? You bring people in from countries that don't align with yours so that you can control those people. It's very simple. It's evil as shit what's happening in Canada, but it is very simple to see how they're doing it. The information is out there. None of that is hard to find.
Yeah, it's starting to become abundantly clear for sure. Do you have any parting thoughts, Payman?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump's going to take Greenland, and he's going to get involved in the Alberta separation. and basically put the squeeze on Eastern Canada, the Eastern elites.
That's definitely a plausible scenario too. It's going to be interesting to say, like we've all kind of said that, like this is the most dynamic time geopolitically in the last 80 years, in the last 70 years. I mean, we're going to see transformational, foundational change, especially within our hemisphere.
I wanted
and
to. Sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
thought you were done.
No, I was done.
I was going to say before we finish, I wanted to bring a quote so that when these censorship laws get passed, the three of us all share a jail cell together. Andre Maloche quoting E. Michael Jones: "For every abortion, God sends us a Muslim." E. Michael Jones said,
We'll all be in a courtroom in the near future, and this here will be being played. Thanks,
That
Andre.
is brilliant. For every abortion, God sends us a Muslim. God damn. And you know, abortion is a topic that I talk about all the time because it is, to me, is just children's sacrifices, just like the Old Testament talks about. But one of the guy I recorded a podcast with, man, a couple of years ago, I can't remember what was his name. Shit, I can't remember his name, but he started a foundation, the Pink Rose or the Rose something, and he told me 2 years ago that a third of his generation is missing. He's Gen Z, right? A third of his generation is missing because of abortion. And those numbers, he told me that about 2 years ago. Those numbers are being confirmed right now as we speak, that Gen Zs have lost a third of their population due to abortion. And that is a topic we need to reopen in Canada because it's not even a conversation. It's not like our conservatives in Canada are pro-choice. That's how ridiculous we actually are in Canada, that conservatives can say that they're Christian and pro-choice.
Yeah,
I don't know what you guys are smoking.
Moron, like you said earlier, that's the same oxymoron.
It's not an oxymoron. They're morons. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing at all. I'm kidding. I'm not calling them name, but you can't be a conservative, a Christian, and be pro-choice. You can't embrace murder. You just can't.
100%. I agree with that. So I will ask everyone again if they could please share the stream. We get most of our views after the live broadcast, so it still benefits and it's still very much appreciated. I want to thank you very much, Nico, for coming on to chat with us. You're coming on my show, Dumb the Wiser, on the 13th. So we'll get into, I'm a Christian as well. We'll get into some of that, maybe some abortion. I'd definitely like to talk about some of the shill accounts, the fake accounts, this ecosystem on X especially. There's a lot of fake, disingenuous voices, but we could touch on all those topics on Tuesday. Why don't you tell our audience where they could find you?
I am on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, small presence on X. I'm on Clapper, all at Real Nico Lagan. But if you want to encourage me, go to the YouTube channel. We run a daily show from Sunday to Thursday, an hour a day. I record about 7 or 8 episodes a week, actually, because I record with a bunch of different people. But all to say that I'm always about conversation. It's all about comments. We get hundreds, if not thousands, of comments on our shows, and that's what I want. So if you guys are looking for civil discourse, you want a place where you can disagree and the host has the balls to take your comments when you disagree with them and debate you, that's the place to be. If you want to have a voice because you're a political orphan, that's what we do.
Excellent. Any parting words, Payman?
Mr. Lagan, thank you very much for coming on.
Mr. What the fuck? Yeah, my
Nico.
pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, and just before we go, I want to say almost everything you've said and expressed on this episode, we've said similar things. We line up very similarly ideologically, so it'll be interesting to have future conversations. But with that
Same
said,
haircut too. Same haircut too.
But yeah, brother, I'm sporting it. I want to thank you again, and I want to thank everyone for watching and sharing and interacting. My name's JP Berg, and this is the Philosopher, the Stoic, and the Teddy Bear. Cheers.